YouTube, this is Shadow Hero 90, welcoming you to my review series, Sexism in Movies and TV. So there's a whole list of reasons I could make as to why I do this show. In fact, during the Season 8 finale, I made a top 10 list of the double standards that Hollywood has when it comes to gender, or biological sex, whatever you want to call it. And I did make a lot of good points, and there are a ton of other topics. But the biggest and most glaring issue with what I tackle in this series boils down to the word hypocrisy. I mean, a lot of the stuff that happens to characters who are male on mostly American TV are things that would never happen to a female character in a million years. There's no way the FCC or foreign television would ever let that happen. If they did, Tumblr, X, Twitter, whatever social media platform is infested with cancel pigs at the moment, would rip them apart, metaphorically speaking. One reason I have to do this show more or less comes down to one word, and that is validation. Now, there are a ton of characters on TV who would be complete toxic role models for girls. And when it comes to those characters and their massive egos, the show will instantly validate them as opposed to taking a stand with reality and put them in their place the way they would with any male character, even if he's a character who's in the right. And that's kind of something that you don't see on American TV or shows imported from Japan, i.e. anime. Seems like good role models for boys on TV and in films have dwindled, while the number of bad role models for girls has not only gone up, but yeah, I'm just gonna say it. The people who write this schlock will instantly validate their horrid behavior at every point. And it's not just bad behavior. They also have massive egos that these crap shows will instantly bend over to validate as well. And when they're not doing that, they're more or less depriving girls of actual good role models. Instead, most role models for girls are the worst type of brats you can imagine. You know, the kind that would actually hurt their brother over something completely insignificant and minuscule. In recent years, positive role models for boys have fallen by the wayside. replaced by spineless cucks who cannot stand up for themselves and will bend over backwards for a girl, whether she be family or someone he has a crush on, and will more or less be screwed over in the end. And when you look at how these terrible episodes of TV shows and horrible films are written, the show and or film thinks this is okay. It says an awful lot about the jackass who wrote it. We need a men's rights revolution when it comes to the entertainment industry, specifically in film and television, because if we don't, things are going to stay the same. I blame the current state of movies and TV as to why young boys and young men have such low self-esteem. It should be pretty obvious that's why. No good role models equals terrible self-esteem. And those are some really good reasons as to why I do this series. Chowder. That late 2000s cartoon. I did not see much of it when it first aired, but from what I've seen before it was taken off of Max, it's pretty good. But like all cartoons, it definitely has its fair share of dud episodes. Ones that stink, or in this case are outright offensive, making you wonder, why haven't a group of outraged fathers, banded together and sued Warner Brothers over this cartoon? And I'm not going to dance around it. Most of those bad episodes center around Panini and her mentor Endive. These two are the absolute worst part of the show. This simply could have been about a boy trying to be a chef and actually having to learn how to do it step by step. But no, they had to add these characters in and ruin it. In this episode of Sexism in Movies and TV, I will be looking at 3 episodes of Chowder and something else to more or less explain why this could have been way better than it is, but H.G. Greenblatt, or at least I think that's his name, I'm pretty sure that's his name, he seriously wrecked his first creation, throwing in a deranged, overweight stalker and a sexist, man-hating cunt. Okay, the first episode on the chopping block is the Season 1 episode, Schnitzel Quits. And I really gotta say, the levels of hypocrisy are over 9,000. Okay, this episode, the title gives it away, and also reveals why, if Mung was ever meant to have a rival or an arch nemesis, for it to work, the rival cook should have been a man, and this episode points out why. as the title pretty much gives away what happens in the episode. After putting up with Truffles and Mung's bullshit, Schnitzel finally goes through his breaking point and quits. And after being mocked by Truffles, he is instantly hired by Endive. And the first thing he does as her employee is, and before I say it, there's a list of a certain trope that I need to go over before I actually say it. Now, if we're supposed to hate Jabba the Hutt for this, and hate this guy for what he's doing to this girl, then Schnitzel's first job, essentially being cleaning Endive's pool topless, and essentially having to go along with her role-playing, comes off as really fucking hypocritical. If we're meant to hate Jabba the Hutt for what he did to Princess Leia, and by extension, hate characters like him, then, by all fairness, we should be hating Endive just as much. Especially since what she does to Schnitzel is sexual harassment. Guys I used as examples were from Star Wars and Korgoth of Barbaria, which I did see, and both of those villains were killed off at the end. Now, being a kids show, Chowder could not pull off Endive, but you could easily, but since the status quo in Chowder is God, you could easily have Schnitzel sue for sexual harassment, and if you wanted things to go back to the status quo, you could have Schnitzel essentially press his luck by trying to get revenge on Mung and Truffles by essentially, I was just thinking have him essentially wager what he got from Endive, i.e. her business and everything she owned, in a card game against Mung, and lose. Then we'd have a way for Endive to be punished, while at the same time for Schnitzel to have to crawl back to Mung, and Mung to realize what an asshole he had been towards Schnitzel, hire him back, apologize, and instantly give him a raise. You could end the episode there. Okay, Cartoon Network Block Party, issue 57. What is wrong with this image? Well, I shouldn't need to explain that. Panini has Chowder on a leash like a dog, while Gazpacho laughs in the background. This is insanely fucked up, especially since this is a comic book aimed at children. What kind of fucked up message does this send? And I don't even need to read this to know that Panini will not get any consequences. Because the assholes who wrote for and illustrated this comic watch Cartoon Network. They are huge fans of all the shows on Cartoon Network. They've seen Chowder, and since Panini gets no consequences on the show, the writers are not going to give her any consequences in the comic book adaptation. This is hate-mongering in the guise of humor. This is not funny at all. If the comic book had ended like this, it would have had a purpose. But I guarantee you it won't, so it doesn't. It's just hate-mongering, and at this point, I am surprised that a group of pissed-off fathers hasn't tried to sue Warner Brothers for peddling such unfunny, done-to-death, gynocentric jokes like this. Okay, Season 2, Episode Apprentice Club. I really don't need to say how fucked up this is. I did a gender-swapped equivalent in the 100th episode of this series, but in all fairness, Panini said she just ran for president of this club to pass a law to make chowder her property. And the episode thinks this is okay. They were playing sappy music and everything. The idiots who wrote for Chowder really wanted us to sympathize for Panini and feel bad for her. But I guarantee you, if that one boy who actually did like her was the one pulling this stunt, he would have gotten the ever-loving shit kicked out of him. Okay, the series finale from the third and final season, Chowder Grows Up. Basically, give it around 20 years, and Panini went completely insane, expecting Chowder to marry her, and treats her own apprentice like the daughter she never had. In all fairness, this is not Chowder's fault. It's really more like Panini's fault for being a deranged stalker and potentially destroying Chowder's view of girls. We're supposed to see Chowder as an idiot. We're supposed to see Panini as someone he screwed over by not growing up. But given everything she's done in the show's 3-season run, yeah, you can't really come to that conclusion. Him turning her down and her going crazy feels like some kind of form of poetic justice. Well, not seems like, that's actually what it would be. And this gets really infuriating because he does marry Panini in the final scene of the episode. And speaking of fucked up relationships, well, Schnitzel ends up marrying Endive. We find that out in the falling action that says what happens to all the characters. Basically, during the last scene of the final episode, Schnitzel ends up realizing he liked marrying the woman who sexually harassed him. Do you have any idea how screwed up that is? That would be like if Marge divorced Homer and married Mr. Burns in a certain episode of The Simpsons. Or if Return of the Jedi had ended with Princess Leia marrying Jabba the Hutt. Okay, and I'm just gonna end this review by saying that I don't really think that the guy who created this has a very good view of men. I doubt that he even likes being a man. he doesn't exactly have a good image of men, and I can say that because I am a writer, and you can tell a lot, when it comes to writers, you can tell a lot of their opinions just by looking at their work. This guy has a really messed up opinion of men, and I don't really think he likes them all that much. Schnitzel Quits could have been the series finale, and he could have gone on to have his own business, and we could have seen him making more money than Mung. But instead, Shnitzel was married off to a woman who sexually harassed him, and we find out that he likes this relationship. You know, instead of divorcing her and taking half of everything she makes, the whole thing of Chowder and Panini would have eventually ended like this. I'm not exaggerating. This is how that final interaction would have ended if, the writer didn't potentially hate men, and if the show actually wanted to have some sense of justice or a moral compass, and did not want to endorse stalking or incel-like behavior. And with that said, I am bringing this review to a close.